Yo, what's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Zeppelin, and today I am here with quite an impromptu video, one that I actually did not think that I would be doing, and that is a review of the Uncharted film. I'm currently recording this on the 11th of February, the very same day it came out. I went to see it this afternoon, and I really wanted to talk about it, and currently at the moment, with how YouTube is going, I really even shouldn't be putting this video up yet. What you're probably seeing on my YouTube channel as of now is just a lot of reactions going up that I had pre-recorded in the process of doing a channel revamp. Like, even if you're a regular on my channel, you can probably see that this camera way better than the camera you're normally used to. It's because I have this set up in preparation for the big rebrand and revamp, but I just felt compelled to talk about this movie, and hell, I may even leave this video until after the rebrand happens and put it out after then. But I actually just really want to talk about it, and the reason I said the intro the way I did and why not many things are different other than the camera is just because I may end up putting this out like tomorrow or the day after. I just wanted to record it and get my thoughts out there, and I'll see afterwards whether or not I'll post it. But I did feel it would be really important to talk about this film, as I have stated in a video in the past that my all-time favorite video game was Uncharted 4, and I had my reservations about there being an Uncharted film. I always knew that I was going to enjoy it, but I was really worried about whether or not it would actually be a good film. And for the sake of this review, I'm going to try and keep it as spoiler-free as I can, but I'm making no promises, just keep that in mind. But what I will say about the film is that I really enjoyed it. Now, just to get it out of the way before you may think it's actually a masterpiece of a film, it is not an amazing film whatsoever. It's not doing anything overly new. It is not an absolute gem of a film. I'm not sitting here saying it's perfect before you think I'm an Uncharted fanboy who has deluded himself into thinking this film is good. All right, now again, I do want to watch it again to be doubly sure, but I'm going to go off my kind of initial impressions of watching it for the first time, and for the first time I really enjoyed it. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way with this film, and that is the casting of Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg as Drake and Sully. And I had my reservations about Tom Holland even being Drake, but I had a feeling he could pull it off, and he definitely does. The real concern for me was Mark Wahlberg playing Sully, but I gotta say he actually does a surprisingly okay job. Now, both of these actors don't play the role perfectly in terms of maybe mimicking the voices or having them really sound like the game version of the characters, but they actually do kind of feel like the characters. And I literally just watched a review before this to see what other people were thinking of the film as well, and he made a very good point. I can't remember who it was for the life of me, but he said that when you saw Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg together as Sully and Nate, you actually felt like you were watching Sully and Nate, if that made sense. Maybe it was the music, the way it was shot. One thing I will say that this film does get, well, maybe not spot on, but 90% correct, that most other video game adaptations don't, is that they actually got the pacing of the film for the most part on par with the pacing of the video games, which was a very hard thing to do. I mean, you have the setup at the beginning, you have place one, a bunch of stuff goes down, big set piece in place 2, and then getting the finale set up for place 3. Now, what I will say is that the third act felt a little lacking, and the film ends rather abruptly. I think they're really banking on making more sequels, which is a risky thing to do in the video game adaptation business. However, with how this film was, I actually really do see there being a potential for more films in the future, and I think there should be. One of the reasons that spurred me on to do this reaction is that if somehow this reaction does well whatsoever, it may be an indicator that, okay, critically it may not do well, because so far what I'm seeing critically is that it's getting critically panned. But myself as a fan of Uncharted from as a kid growing up, who knows a lot about Uncharted and had maybe the highest I had low expectations of the film to go into, but I had a high standard to be reached to impress me, and it definitely was close to reaching that. Like, I'm seeing fan reviews come in at the moment that are sitting around the 70-75%, maybe even 65%, and that's exactly within the bracket that I put it. It's such a fun film, such a good film, and any critic that you're saying is giving it a 4 out of 10, 3 out of 10, I've seen a lot of 2 out of 5 float around, very deluded. I think those people are not giving the film enough of a chance whatsoever. I think while the casting was weird, it surprisingly works well. The plot is interesting, albeit lacking in certain points, especially towards the end. It definitely feels like an Uncharted plot, although it may be the bare bones of an Uncharted plot. You even had I can't remember the name of the actress, but she was playing It's not Chloe. Yeah, no, her name's Chloe. Apologies, I forgot her name there. Was playing Chloe in it. I was really worried about her playing Chloe because I don't know how actually the Uncharted fanbase feels about Chloe on the overall, but I really, really liked her as a character, and I think her voice really worked for the character. Same as the rest of them in the games, but her voice kind of came across as a really sassy, domineering woman. And it was kind of scary seeing a different casting of her, if that they really wouldn't get the essence of her character through. But I really think they've done her character well in the movie, and the chemistry that she has with Tom Holland is amazing. I think it works really, really well. Again, I don't think it's perfect, but I think it suits for what this character is supposed to represent in the film, and it does sort of represent the most part in the earlier games. You'll know what I'm talking about when it comes to Chloe's character. It definitely feels reminiscent of her character from the game, which I like. You know, someone who's just not entirely trustworthy whatsoever. And that's another thing that surprised me, is that the chemistry here was surprisingly good. You could have easily got a Mark Wahlberg who's phoning it in for his millions, a Tom Holland who's just looking to have a good time based off a video game he liked, and get relatively average performances. But these actors really are giving it their all and seem like they really enjoyed the source material and wanted to bring the world to life in film, where I think this series can do incredibly well. I think you've got a case where, even if it was like the Resident Evil films, which are kind of critically panned, hated by fans, but ultimately done well at the box office, because there's a part of people that just enjoy those films. Now, of course, I think this Uncharted film is way above in terms of quality of the Resident Evil films, but for anyone who's kind of moderately enjoyed the Resident Evil films, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say that there's just a little bit of fun to be had in there, in the fact that it's set in the Resident Evil world. And this Uncharted film has that in abundance. I left the theater really wanting more, annoyed that we probably won't get a sequel for, I'm guessing, like 2 years, which is the best thing to be annoyed about, really. I felt like this film had more to give, but in a very good way, meaning that I'm just going to happily come back and watch a second one and not think I've only watched half a film. I just want to see more. I think there's a lot to enjoy in this film as an Uncharted fan. Even, I don't know if I said this already, because I rambled a lot there, so I can't really remember. Even Antonio Banderas is really, really good in the film. You know, there's an actor who could have absolutely phoned in a typical villain performance, but he actually played the role very, very well. And the setting of this, the way it was filmed, you can definitely tell it wasn't even a film that was done on some moderate budget. PlayStation Studios are really going all in here, wanting to really bring all their titles to life on the big screen, and I feel like the budget shows, and thank God it had that budget. If anything comes out of this, what I would implore PlayStation Studios to do is keep putting the big budget into video game movies. A lot of people maybe get scared of the term video game movie, and they might pull the funding a little bit, kind of rein it in. But if anything, for video game films, you really need more funding in there, because you're bringing a lot more unrealistic things to life in terms of what you're bringing in from a video game universe. So it's very important that you have the budget there to really bring that to life in a comfortable way. And one thing I will say as well, just to add on to that, when you're watching this film, it feels like the world of Uncharted. I've talked about the pacing being on point, the casting and the chemistry actually turning out surprisingly to be on point, but the general vibe as well is absolutely spot on when it comes to Uncharted. Now, when I say absolutely spot on when it comes to Uncharted, you're probably talking in terms of levels. You're talking maybe Uncharted 3 story level, or the Uncharted game on the PS Vita. You're not quite hitting the levels of Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 4 in terms of absolutely phenomenal titles in every aspect, but you're hitting that level where it's like, I could at least buy this as a low tier Uncharted game, and a low tier Uncharted game is still one of the best games out there, so that is a compliment. Maybe it's the fact that I went into this film with low expectations that maybe made me come out being thoroughly surprised, but I really do think if you just go into this film telling yourself that I'm not expecting a masterpiece, but I'm expecting a good time, you'll actually find a lot of enjoyment with these characters, and you will actually fall in love with the casting a little bit. It really feels like if they were to make sequels in the future, which is kind of, it's obvious that they want to make sequels from this, and I really, really want it to happen. But it feels like that these actors who may initially even feel miscast will really grow into the role. I mean, think about it. If we get 4 or 5 Uncharted films over the next 15, 20 years, for example, if they really want to push it that far, if people still care about Uncharted at that point, which I hope they do, you could have a Mark Wahlberg coming into his 60s, who's actually getting grey, actually growing out the mustache, who begins to look like a Sully, and then you could also have a Tom Holland who's beginning to maybe get more chiseled, a bit more, well, he is chiseled in the film, but I mean in terms of like facial features, as he gets older, he might get a bit bonier in the face, his hair might recede a little bit, so he spikes it up a little bit. You know, you can actually see that they could age way better into the characters that they're currently playing, to the point where that if you buy Uncharted 3 or Uncharted 4 coming out in 2030 or 2032, they probably will actually look very believable in comparison to the games that we're used to. I mean, even at the end, again, not a complete spoiler, it sort of teases not necessarily the first game, but you'll even notice at the top he was wearing, some of the hardcore fans will know that the top that he's wearing at the end in the post-credit scene is from the first game. So it definitely feels like they are edging towards at least doing some sort of retelling of the games, but in a different light, and sort of having that be the canon of the movie series. You know, sort of like how The Last of Us is potentially doing with its series, how it's actually going to be, the rumors at the moment that the outbreak is going to happen in 2003 instead of 2013, and there's also rumors that they're remaking The Last of Us 1 from the ground up. Maybe we're getting a case of some redone canon. And if that's the case, I mean, why not? In terms of like the actual arc of Uncharted, it's very much had its time. Nate's character in terms of video games can very much walk along the beach and be happy in the fact that he's had his time in the sunshine and it's finished, and we don't need to worry about that canon necessarily being maintained, because there'll be an acceptance among audiences that that's its own contained little world. And maybe the games for the moment will continue off the canon of the games, but if the movies sort of become the canon of the Uncharted series going forward, is there really any harm in that? I mean, it means that the game's done well enough to transfer over to the big screen and people enjoy it on the big screen. So if there's some sort of lore changes or canon changes going forward, if they do more, I really don't think it's the end of the world, because you may even think going into this one about how they changed the Nate and Sully meeting, that even that alone might have taken you aback because you're used to the way it was in Uncharted 3, the game. But honestly, in this, it doesn't feel too bad. It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. You know, maybe in terms of the start, they get to know each other a little bit too quick. Like him, like, you know, Drake from not knowing Sully to then knowing Sully may seem a little bit, whoa, okay, now they're instantly working together. It's happened a little fast. It's understandable why they did that, because they wanted to get straight into the kind of meat of the plot. And you are dealing with a film here. We're used to TV shows now with movie budgets that can kind of build this stuff up over time. So the areas like that may feel a little bit weird, but ultimately the redone way in which they meet and how they write Nate's brother into the story, it doesn't feel that weird at all. It's very buyable, and as long as it's kind of being somewhat overseen, at least by the likes of Neil Druckmann and people who had their hand in the original creation of the game, then they're not really going to stray too far from the original source material. And as long as they're keeping the vibe and the fun of the universe it's set in, then I don't think you can have any complaints. So to conclude on what I would give this film out of 10, I would 100% give this film a 7 out of 10. Maybe on a good day I give it a 7.5. Maybe after a couple of rewatches and it gets a little tired on me, I give it a 6.5. But what you're going in to when you watch this film is a film that feels like an Uncharted film, which is surprising how many video game films don't get that feel whatsoever. It's a film that's fun, has good action but not great action, surprising chemistry, a lovable characters, and the promise of more good times to come if you enjoyed this journey. So I really do implore you guys to show this film support so that we can get more, because I think there's a lot to offer here. I think what we've gotten with this film as well is the bare bones of what could be really, really good films going forward. Like, we could look in the future and be like, yeah, out of those 4 Uncharted films, probably the second one was the best, because it feels like they could have way more to do with the Drake and Sully we're more accustomed to when it comes to doing more films in the future. So we got to really hope that comes along. I do hope you enjoyed this. I apologize if it seemed really random and that everything's maybe a little out of place here compared to what you're used to. Again, we're kind of changing the setup now, getting ready for the rebrand of my YouTube and Twitch, and I'm still like inundated with work and doing that. I'm even surprised I got to the cinema to see the film, but I really wanted to talk about this because Uncharted means a lot to me. Again, I met Nolan North. I've not talked to Troy Baker, but I've like seen him. He was there with Nolan North, and it's a series that means a lot to me as a video game fan, and I'm a passionate video game fan, so I did want to share my thoughts on it. But I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to see more stuff in future, and also if you're into the gaming content that I make, which I know not as many people are, that's absolutely fine. There will be more places you can see my gaming content very, very soon. So again, just make sure to keep an eye out on all my socials and everything, and you'll see what's coming soon. Take care. Have a good one, folks. Peace.